Good morning, guys, and welcome back to another vlog. It's about 9 o'clock in the morning, the day after Ricky and I pulled 2 shifts on Bad Apple. Man, I'm tired. Actually dropping by SOS Customs in Oceanside because, as you guys saw in the previous video, the rear inner quarter panels did not fit the car. The Japanese ones that I got through JDM Buyer, they did not work. In order to get the speaker grills that I wanted, I had to also purchase the panels, and I thought, well, heck, let's see if the panels fit. They don't. We're gonna run in, see what it's about, see if he has materials laying around that he can do this in, and see how much he's gonna charge me for it. Saul has an idea of how to actually create a 2-piece panel. So because the contours on this are so complex, it's probably going to need to have a stitch. So they're thinking about tossing a stitch on the panel right here, and then making this gray suede to match the headliner, and then this black leather to match the door panel. I think it's going to look awesome. Not much of a Starbucks guy, boys, but this is gonna hit the spot. I really need this. We don't need the fittings for the actual end. I have -10 fittings for here already, but there is a hole that's for a sensor if you want to run it on this oil cooler. We are not running a sensor here, so I need to get a plug for this. So I wanted to bring this with me just to make sure we get the right thread pitch and size for the plug. And I also have a few of the lines that I've brought with me. This is the power steering line, and a few of the other bolts and fittings that go in the block that I need to recreate into stainless steel lines or a different type of line. So I'll use those as examples to make sure I get the right thing the first time. These lines are pretty expensive, so if you screw up, it's an expensive mistake. Eddie actually helped me with TJ's RX-7. This is a room that I spent a lot of time in building TJ's car, but that wasn't really on video. So I'm bringing you guys along for the full tour on this episode. So basically what I'm going to do is, I've got all the stuff I showed you guys here that I brought to Crown so that we don't screw up. And we've got our massive list of parts that are needed. And Eddie's the expert in fittings and a lot of things involving cars. So I actually like sitting here shooting the shit with him. These visits usually turn into long visits. But at any rate, we're going to get started on pulling the parts we need and getting some lines made. So I'll show you guys some of that stuff. And they're gonna go ahead and make lines. One thing that Crown is known for is their brake lines. You can get them in any color, which is really cool. But that's their main business, is brake lines. So they're per application. Whatever car you have, you just call them and they already make it and they just send it out to you. It's great. And they differ from the other brake lines on the market. You can't really see it too well, but yeah. All right, guys, so after about an hour and a half inside Crown Performance, I've got all the bits. Now we're off to the shop. Thank you, Eddie at Crown, so much for taking care of me. You're a legend. All right, boys, finally back here at the hunt quarters after running around all morning and then getting into the office, having to take care of office work. Yes, I actually do office work, not just work on cars. So that's a couple hours later since I last checked in with you guys. I went ahead and busted the upper intake manifold off the car. We had already installed it last night. I need to cover this up just so nothing falls in there. So I'm gonna do that real quick. I'm gonna start putting on all of our new hoses and lines and fittings that we picked up this morning. It's all in here. And our sweet flex fuel fittings, our new power steering line. Wow, stuff looks so nice. So I'm gonna go ahead and get cranking on that. And I'm also going to go ahead and spend some time tidying up this area a little bit. Remember when I told you guys once the intake manifold's on, you don't really see much of this? Man, I was wrong. You actually see a lot of it. So I got to spend some time in here cleaning up those wires. Even though it is a baller rye wire mil-spec harness, there's really not a whole lot of places to put this stuff. So what I want to try to do is get it as neat and tidy as possible. Again, a sensor that's just, it's meant to be like this, but unfortunately it's right in the line of sight. So I'm either going to figure out another place to put it, or just try to tidy up around it, make it look as good as possible. At any rate, I feel like that spot on the engine bay is really critical because it's the first thing that you look at when you look into the engine bay is underneath that. It's like the first focal point. So I want to get it cleaned up as much as possible. So we'll see how far I can get today. I'm going to start installing all the rest of this plumbing things because we really want to try to crank this thing over tomorrow. So getting fluids in this motor by the end of tonight or this morning is imperative. Straight on one end, and we've got a 90-degree fitting on the other. So this 90 fitting is actually going to come off of this at the clutch master cylinder, and then this goes down to the clutch line that comes off the slave cylinder. There will also be one of these down there as well. Should be a pretty trick little setup, and we got the hose made a couple inches longer than it probably needed to be so that we can route it where we want to and kind of keep it out of sight, out of mind. Alright, clutch line is all in, and I've gone ahead and moved on to our oil feed for our turbo, which goes from here, behind all of these bits, and down to here. And I've already installed the fitting that goes on the block. So it adapts the block to a to a dash 4 line that's going to go and feed the oil from the block to the turbocharger. And then we have to build the drain line, the oil drain line that will go down and drain back into the pan down there. That'll be the next line we do, and that'll be a dash 10 line. So nice thing about the oil feed line is that we already made it, and it just needs to be screwed on now. Both fittings are in place. Now it's just connect the dots with the hose. Alright, so the oil feed line is now in place. I'm not going to tighten this one up because we do have to pull this back off. We've got some caulking to do in order to get all of the bolts and everything in the flange underneath and get this stuff to where it needs to be so that we can set up all the routing properly. But I am happy with the way this turned out. I do like the black shielding from Crown Performance on here, and it does kind of help hide it away, and it connects right there. So good job, Ricky, on the measurement. Ricky and I did this about 3 o'clock or 3:30 this morning, so happy with the way that how that worked out. All right, last but not least is our pressurized power steering hose. We've got a big fitting on one end and a small banjo fitting on the bottom. Let me go ahead and get these lined up and tighten down. All right, all good on the bottom now. Now we can actually move on to getting the oil feed in return for the oil cooler set up, get our oil cooler mounted, get our power steering cooler mounted, and get everything plumbed. It's a big job for tonight, but we got this. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and put the low pressure side of the power steering equation in place. This is a fitting that takes it from the rack to a dash 8, and we're gonna run dash 8 fitting to our cooler. And on the other side of the cooler, it's going to go and return back up to the reservoir for the power steering pump. This is a trick setup. This is exactly what we did on TJ's car. Unfortunately, none of it was documented, so now we're doing it. We've got all the fittings and lines on that we can for tonight. I've gone ahead and fitted the bumper on the car. As you can see, this thing has massive openings. So this is our oil cooler opening. This is our V-mount opening. I'm not really happy with this fiberglass. It's a little warped from sitting. We're probably gonna end up making an aluminum shroud that closes off this. There's a little gap here between the radiator and the bottom of the bumper. And we'll probably close off these sides as well with aluminum at some point. Probably not before 7 stock, we'll probably leave it open. And we also have this other massive window of opportunity here, and that's where our power steering cooler is gonna go. Both coolers fill these up pretty dang good, and I think if we shroud this in real nice, it frames out all of our cooling products, or all of our cooling elements. I think it's gonna look pretty dope. But now I'm gonna start kind of cutting up some brackets. I went ahead and got some basic steel strap and aluminum strap material so that I can whip up some brackets and things. And I have plenty of hardware here in stock. I try to keep all that stuff here so that when it's late at night I can actually get things done. I don't have to worry about running out to the store and stuff like that. So I'm gonna go ahead and start making up some brackets. I'm gonna put you guys on the tripod and yeah, you can watch as I work. Alright, well I got carried away guys and actually got this cooler fully mounted without filming, but just to show you what the end result looks like, that's the cooler in its location. I'm kind of happy with it. I think the location's really good. I'm a little miffed about the fittings here. So these are our dash 10 fittings, and obviously this needs to be tightened up a little bit, but these lines are going to come up and run across here, and then they're going to go down this frame rail and back to the engine. So they have to be here, but the question is do we paint this black? So I can get black fittings. These are the Deechworks fittings and they only come in one color. I actually like the pewter look of them, but do you guys think it's distracting? Being that it's seen through the center hole, which normally would be your intercooler hole. I felt like if they fell behind this divider, it would be way cooler, but I don't know, man. It looks pretty perfect. It looks pretty purpose-built sitting like this. If I really don't like the way it looks once the car's on the ground, I think I'll just black the cooler out. It is a badass cooler. I mean, this thing is massively thick, and I think that it's definitely gonna do the trick. But man, is it mean looking. Holy shit. So anyway, I'm gonna keep plugging along. I got one more hole to fill over here with a cooler, and this one mounts a little differently, so I got to build some different type of brackets. Unfortunately, it won't be as simple as this one. This one was pretty easy, so I'm gonna go ahead and start working on that, and I'll try to do a better job of showing you guys how I make these brackets. Alright, so like on the other side, I decided to use a provision that's already on the chassis here. It's hard to see, I think, but there is a little screw hole or bolt hole there. So what I've done is I've made a bracket that's going to stand in here. I'll drill a hole in this, it'll mount to the chassis, which will make it nice and sturdy. Now, with oil coolers and things like that, you don't really want to hard mount them, so I'm going to go ahead and use a thin sheet of rubber that will help with some vibration resistance. Also, having the fittings hooked up with flexible lines also helps with that, but you never want to really hard mount a cooler. A lot of times it'll create a failure on the cooler itself at a weld or at a place where it's been manufactured. So what I'm going to do is mount this here. I'm going to fold these tabs down where I have the lines drawn, and those will encapsulate the feet on here. And so that'll mount one side, and then I'll build a support brace for the other side, and we'll rubber isolate those as well. So we're gonna go ahead and make those brackets complete now, and I'll show it to you guys when it's all finished up. Okay, so bracket 2 is whipped up. That's how it looks. So basically it just has a center hole that mounts to the chassis, and it just has two ends folded over that capture the ends of the oil cooler. The oil cooler is basically flat with the bumper. The bumper kind of starts to come up, so I've made it level with that. I haven't decided whether I like that or not because this gap is uneven. It's kind of messing with my eyesight and how I want it. once the car's down on the ground, you guys are obviously seeing it from a low standpoint, but it's gonna be like this when the car's on the ground. So I think it's actually in a good position. Once you have the cooler mounted where you want it, you have to stabilize it. So I only have one side on each cooler mounted. That means this side's loose and can vibrate and rattle against your bumper and things like that. So I'm gonna go ahead and whip up a bracket for each cooler on the outboard sides to stabilize them, and then I can get on to actually routing the oil lines and the power steering lines. So I'm gonna go ahead and whip up a couple more brackets and get these things stabilized. All right, a couple hours has gone by since I picked up the camera last. We've got our coolers mounted finally. Got our brackets in place. New one here. Our main bracket here holding this in. Our bracket here and our other bracket here. So these things are nice and solid now. Not going anywhere. Now it's time to build the lines. So we've got two -10 lines coming off of here that have to go over to here. This is our thermostatic switch. I've mounted it along the frame rail because these oil lines have to make their way back to right there, and then one at the oil filter back there right below. So they'll run nice and smooth, nice and snugly down the frame rail and up. And they're gonna come from here, from the engine to here, gonna run up underneath this bar and then to here, and then it's gonna go through the cooler, back out, back along the bar, back down to here, through the thermostatic switch, and back up to that oil filter fitting right down there. And what this thermostatic switch does is it waits till the oil gets to 180 degrees. Once the oil gets to 180 degrees, it opens up inside. There's a spring in there, and it allows the oil to pass through the cooler to help cool the oil down. Trick little piece. I'm glad I was able to find a little hidey hole for it along the frame rail that makes sense that we can run the lines back to the engine. We can thank Ricky for that. Second shift is in the house. All right, so pretty happy with the way those turned out. It's a little messy with this stuff hanging down, but that all gets plugged in later on. So we've basically got the cooler lines running up and they tuck under the crash bar and then back down to our sandwich plate or thermostatic switch, thermostatic switch, and then those will then continue on to the engine. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish up the rest of these lines and get this done so I can go home and get some sleep. So it's 3 a.m. Ricky and I are still here at the old hunt quarters. It's like a ghost town around here right now. We are currently clocking the turbo. We had to remove the compressor housing, the guts, and the turbine housing off of the manifold just to get the 4 nuts tight on the bottom of the turbo, so the turbo to the manifold mating surfaces. And now we have to clock each one individually to get it all back together properly so that we can get all of the fittings on there for the water, oil drain, and oil feed lines. It's been quite a pain in the ass. I've built my fair share of lines tonight. This is the last one. This is the oil drain. This is an oil drain line. This has to go on last after we get this thing clocked properly. And we're gonna go home and get some sleep. I'll check in with you guys in a minute. All right guys, it's 3:30 a.m. I'm waxed. Ricky needs to go home and get some sleep, just like I do. Here's where we left off. Everything's plumbed. We've got our oil drain plumbed. Oil feed line replumbed, pulleys back on. We're waiting on one new pulley from Mazda, the idler here, and then all the belts can go back on. The intercooler has been fully cleaned up, ready to go. Upper intake manifold ready to go. we made some serious progress. All of the plumbing's pretty much done. So this car can now get fluids. Tomorrow's a big day. This car is gonna start tomorrow. I hope you guys are gonna tune in the following day for the following episode. Couldn't be more excited about this, but hey dude, guys, I gotta go home. It's 3:30 in the morning. Thank you so much for your support of this project. I hope you can see I'm giving it my all. I hope you can see all the help that Ricky's been giving me, the guys from DNA Garage have been giving me. I've never had that much help on a project before. No questions asked, guys just showing up at the shop to help out. It's really cool and humbling, and I appreciate it. Thank you guys. I'm going to bed.